Hey, how's it going? Well, welcome back to the second Summoner Scuffle. The match is starting in 13 minutes here, but figure we'll just hop on, chat a little bit beforehand, see if anyone in chat has any thoughts about what we can expect with this matchup. So it's going to be Prophet's High Elves versus Vexer's Shadow Elves, and I feel like I'm having a fair bit of difficulty like predicting what we can expect with this matchup. What sort of thoughts do you have about it, Fuzzy Marmot?
So I actually took the time to watch some of the tournament games of High Elves versus Shadow Elves. There were a bunch, and I think the thing I'm most excited about is that both these factions kind of get to play their own game. Like some of the matchups you see, something like we talked about last week, where in the league matchups, Obsidian Dwarves versus Cave Goblins. They're not playing their normal Obsidian Dwarves game. They're trying to survive. But I think this one, it's just so much fun because these are two very deep factions. They're tough to pilot. We have two amazing pilots coming up. And this matchup, really, they both kind of get to be where they want to be on the battlefield. Now, neither of the players is going to just let the opponent occupy their preferred space. But I think we get to really showcase what each of these factions is all about. So I'm excited about that. I mean, I think this is going to be a pretty long game. I think it's going to be a little bit unpredictable because the 45-minute clock means that either of the players can just have a brain fart or have something go wrong that wouldn't normally happen. So that'll be exciting too. I think it just adds another layer of tension and excitement, to just have this play out live. And it's a question of what can you do thinking on your feet right this moment. You don't have a half hour to puzzle out a turn and figure out where all the high elf auras are and, who affects which unit. And same with shadow elves. You don't have this complex decision tree to work through. So it's going to be pretty fast, pretty fun. And probably all four of us are going to be exhausted by the end of it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's so I want to go more into like what you're talking about with like the display or the space that each faction wants to occupy. Maybe before that, actually, I'll just like I will pull up on the stream just some of the cards just to talk about the factions and what they do. We can start with Shadow Elves. So the Shadow Elves are have this interesting mechanic where when you get boost on cylinder and you get boost by damaging things within 3 of cylinder on your turn, you can then pull them back to your hand. And so that lets you just do a ton of things, and you have various like events that will combo with that, like letting you like get in to get some quick dice with glinting speed with your summoner. But in general, this can sort of like lead to a play style of I'm gonna play something like a seeker. It's gonna have extra attack when it first comes down, and I'm gonna do play it. I'm gonna get some attack with it, and then if I have enough boost, if my boost economy is good enough, I'm gonna pull it back and not give you anything to shoot at. So I'm used to this sort of passive play style that we get with Shadow Elves. And then maybe high elves on the other hand have are kind of similar to the vanguards. They like just like building up strong positions. They're all about these auras. Where an aura where all four of their commons have something that extends to every single unit that is within 2 of them, every single common within 2 of them, and that's different. That's different from anything we've seen before. There's like there's no other faction that has effects that are can be used by really both players at the same time. And so you see a lot of stacks of like units behind Arbiters of Peace. You try to position Arbiters of Peace so they affect your units but not your opponent's units. Put some Arbiters of Justice right at the front so your opponents are taking damage. Have some Arbiters of War in the back to buff yourself. So and then Valeria can move, and every time she moves, she forces a unit. And if it forces a unit away from herself, it's going to take 2 damage because she has greater engage. Does justice helps the shadow elves produce boosts? That's a good call. Yes, it does. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see too many justices coming down. Um, so yeah, like going over that, like what? Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say for anyone who's interested in Prophet's opinion of the Shadow Elves producing, getting boosts from the Arbiter of Justice's Atone, you can hop over to the Discord and read all about it. I believe it's in the High Elves channel. But we have a little treatise from Prophet about, I think, maybe his strategy going into this matchup. And he wrote that before we knew we were going to do this. He wrote that before the people in the Discord voted for these two particular factions for these two particular players. So anyone who has multiple windows open can go check that out.
That's funny.
Um, but it is going to be fun. It is going to be a very very interesting interaction, and hopefully we'll be able to talk a bit about it. How high elves can maybe mitigate some of that benefit they're giving to their opponent. Because Prophet has said, I don't think I can play this game without Arbiters of Justice. I think I need,
Huh.
some melee unit to do some damage.
Interesting.
You know,
Interesting. That's yeah.
yeah.
I wouldn't have predicted that. I'll be very
Well,
curious to
that's
see
what he
that.
told us. I mean, who knows what he actually does on stream? Who knows whether his public words match whatever his gameplay is going to be?
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things that's nice to highlight about these competitors in particular is that Prophet's probably one of the better known names here, certainly deserves it on grounds of gameplay. You know, won League a season ago and was the runner up in the previous Plaid Hat Games tournament. And I won't spoiler this one in case anyone hasn't watched Colby's stream from Plaid Hat Games on Thursday. But he's one of the top players, and he also contributes a lot of strategy thoughts on the Discord. So any new player with a question about, how do I operate this faction, you're decently likely to get an answer from really one of the best players out there. And I think that's one of the things that's great about this community. His opponent, Vexer, is definitely newer and definitely, less well known, but also just, really great guy. Definitely interacts behind the scenes a little bit more. So I've talked to him over message a lot about some of these strats, private message, direct messaging about these strats. So just really different styles within the community as well as on the battlefield. Actually, on the battlefield, in some ways, they're pretty similar because they're both so amazingly good. But that's part of the fun of bringing them out in a public venue like this and with a chance to chat with them afterwards and, talk about the game. Um, have a beer with them, figuratively speaking.
Yeah. So something I feel like I've noticed, and I'm not sure if this is right, but it seems like both Prophet and Vexer seem to like be on the pioneering end of the newer decks. Whenever the new decks come out, they seem to always shoot right to the top. Like just noticing the most recent tournament, Flat Hat tournament, which I won't spoil, but Waterdeep took three master set decks, and Prophet took three decks that were outside of the master and starter set. And so and I don't know, and Vexer. I, I know him for his Shadow Elves. I think that's a bit like stereotyping him into one play style, but just right at the beginning, being like the player that is known for a really strong Shadow Elves. And Shadow Elves are tough. Like I feel like you can play them so much and still just not even know where to start. And so like feeling
Oh my
comfortable.
goodness.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head with both these players. Is they both dig deep into the cutting edge, and both these factions, I think we need to add. We don't. The community, I would say, has definitely not fully figured out high elves.
Oh yeah.
And I would say with Shadow Elves, there's a few players that definitely have them dialed in and feel almost unbeatable. I'll also say that they're not unbeatable, and I know this because Vexer is one of the maybe the very few people that knows how to beat them. And unfortunately, he cannot be his own opponent today. So this matchup is at the cutting edge. This is a matchup where if we, the commentators, are completely wrong, I would love to hear people's opinions on chat, in the Discord, we don't know either. We're still figuring out these factions, and definitely figuring out the factions and figuring out the interaction between them specifically. It's kind of uncharted territory, and that's why it's fun to bring these two particular players on, because they always seem to be at the forefront.
Yeah, yeah, and that segues into something nicely that I want to talk about, just like with what we're doing commentating here, because I completely agree with you that like whatever I say, like especially about High Elf, something that I haven't played that much, like it just end up being totally wrong. Like I think here with our commentary, like we're doing our best to try to figure things out, to try to learn from things, but by no means think that just because we say something it has to be right. Like please come up with your own opinions in chat. Let us know what you think. This is all just here for us to see some tough matchups and try to puzzle it out together.
It's really more fun this way. It's definitely more fun if people in chat have opinions and we can respond in real time. Maybe Ben and I are completely wrong or caught up in some groupthink, or, you know, just just the game's moving too fast. So that's really the fun of being here, is getting more ways to interact with the community and, start more conversations. Start conversations other than just trying to buff and nerf a specific faction. We have plenty of those.
Yeah, 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 and it's funny. Like I think I've said this before, but like we will have so many like discussions on the Discord with like how do we need to buff Sarah? How does Sarah need to be changed and buffed? And then someone will bring up, how do you play against Sarah? And it's like a discussion that we've never had before, like of like what like like if you're losing against Sarah, like what do you do? How do you play differently to try to beat Sarah? So I don't know. So yeah, so sometimes things like that. Like I don't even know if I've even thought about like I've been thinking so much about how do I play as Shadow Elves? How do I get all these boosts and use them efficiently? I haven't even really thought about, well, how do I effectively play against them? Do I want to be aggressive? Do I want to play their own game and hang back? Like, it's yeah, there's just so many interesting discussions to be had along those lines.
I mean, I think both these players are going to have some really good thoughts on this, and we'll hopefully get to see this on the battlefield. I have definitely seen Shadow Elf games, where Cylinder has a pile of boosts and can't effectively use them. He's collecting them, and whether it's because, the opponent is one turn killing his units, whether the opponent is denying him magic, or whether the opponent is denying him field position, so the units that he's attacking with are too far away to bounce. It's tough. It's 5D chess, but that's
Yeah.
that's that's the fun of this. That's and I'm not even good at Shadow Elves. I am just sort of mildly obsessed with them because, you know, um, just because, sorry, I'm just mildly obsessed with them because they're a fun faction. But you set me up at the controls, and I'm just like, what do I do?
Yeah, well, I feel like that's how I first got into Shadow Elves was just like I just played them a ton in person with a friend and it's just like I have no idea what's going on, but just this mechanic is so intriguing to me that I just wanted to keep playing it even though I was pretty bad at them at first. And it looks like we've hit 11 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and tell the contestants that they're good to start.
All right, so just so you guys know, they've had a game invite sitting around for the last 10 minutes or so, so we're letting them know that they can accept the invitation. We'll get the game link as soon as they send it to us, and once we can pull it up on screen, we can start watching.
Oh, I think I'm
Ben and I,
seeing it. Sorry, keep
alrighty.
going.
Yep. Yeah, I'm clicking on the game link, and I'm gonna be juggling my dual monitors so I can try to watch this time and make sure I'm not on a paused screen like last time.
Oh, it's starting.
Okay. All right. So, High Elves turn one. And I mean, this is such a great battlefield setup for High Elves. I've seen this. They can get an attack in with Valeria immediately, fairly safely. So I think there's a pretty decent turn, it's sort of tactical turn one advantage for both of these factions. but the game goes on long enough that it's definitely not the decider. It's definitely not one of the ones where, cave goblins wiped your starting units and now you're playing at a disadvantage from the jump. Um,
Yeah.
all right. All right, Prophet's thinking.
And so
So we in the booth do not see the hands, by the way. So we see the same thing everyone else sees. Okay, so kind of a conservative gate.
interesting. Yeah, and so something maybe, I mean, it might be a little bit too late to talk about this while the game is starting, but like you mentioned like when giving the overview of this that both factions have have something a way that they want to be, a play style that they want to be, a place on the board they want to be. And where is that exactly? It's like especially in this matchup, like I'm used to seeing Shadow Elves wanting to hang back, and I'm used to seeing Valeria want to occupy the midfield. How do you think this matchup changes that?
I think both factions have an early opportunity to get to exactly where they want to be. Shadow Elves a lot of times have an advantage against other factions because they have such a strong ranged game. They force the opponent to move up faster than they would normally like. But High Elves is generally, yep, I'm going to charge up. I'm happy to do that. I can have potentially 5 moves per game with Valeria's ability. So High Elves have mobility.
Yeah, and so, but you'd expect the Shadow Elves to still like to stay back and take advantage of their ranged units this game, while also maybe making it hard for the opponent to occupy the midfield, or like what sort of dynamics would you be expecting? Like are the Shadow Elves going to try to move up to stop the occupying the midfield, or just keep staying back and keep that advantage?
Well, they can't stay too far back because if Valeria overruns them, it's good game pretty quickly.
That's what I was
But
thinking. Yeah,
I've actually seen, I'll say this, I think, in open queue, I think I've personally, despite not being the greatest with player with or against Shadow Elves, I've definitely sort of prayed against, I've just fed on people who move Shadow Elves up too fast, too aggressively. I don't think it's their game. So they can selectively take take positions pretty far upfield. They have the Shadow Knights for reach. They can get to places you don't expect them to, but they don't necessarily want to hang out there. Actually, I'm not going to say necessarily. They don't want to hang out there. This is not a faction where Cylinder charges upfield and plants a forward gate like
yeah,
Tundra Orcs.
yeah, yeah,
They want to kind of attack and then fall back into the shadows.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we're chatting and the game's going on. So
yeah. Go ahead.
let's address the plays that have just been made. I mean, this is still a little bit of table setting. They're still trying to get their preferred units in place, definitely. All right, and Vexer's doing some takesy backsies. It's always fun
So,
to
so
watch.
what do you think about that justice being occupying that forward gate, like in the perfect spot to give Cylinder a bunch of boosts, but also for all the units to take a bunch of damage?
I would say it's almost still part of the standard opening. You're kind of expecting that because it's the starting Justice Arbiter.
Yeah,
There's a 50-50 chance of High Elves getting, the first turn. So Shadow Elves pretty much knows they have to prepare for that, in that it's a double-edged sword. So right now, we've got 2 units. Vexer's doing what I said. The Knight's coming up, but both the mage and the knight are right now within that peace aura. So both those units have tough, and that's going to make them a little bit harder to kill. And that's kind of the nature of this game, is having to recalculate your preconceived notions of how strong or weak a unit is.
yeah,
All right, so True Seeker, their best attack, so they're going to take a damage, and it's going to give Cylinder a boost. So now True Seeker can move back, and this is the Seeker it looks like that Cylinder summoned the Knight from. So the Seeker has 1 life left, and I would guess that guy gets bounced. Let's see if he takes down the Justice Arbiter. Yep.
Yep. So it doesn't get
So,
to
all
take a
right, and
damage because they killed it.
yep,
Yep.
yep, and Shadow Knight gets a damage on Valeria. So, so this is the ping pong. This is us getting to the good stuff without a ton of table setting. That's why I said this match is going to be long. But,
Yeah.
unless one of them screws up, which they can in this format, which neither of them is used to,
Yeah.
but it's not gonna have a lot of table setting, and I don't think it's gonna have a long tail end either. I think this game, one summoner, some games you get down to summoner versus summoner attacking each other's gates and trying to really drag out the end game.
Yeah.
I think this matchup, both summoners have both factions have the tools to just kill the summoner in the weaker board position before we get to this sort of, end game, this sort of summoner versus summoner end game. But we're going
Yeah.
to have a lot of mid game in between.
Yeah. For
We're
sure.
going to have a lot of mid game without a lot of setup and without a lot of this sort of like long tail chasing down a summoner to try and kill him.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
right now they're putting each other on the back foot immediately. So now Prophet has to counter with the piece, as far as we know right now, that Peace Arbiter is their only attacking unit on the board. I'm sure he has interesting things in hand, but and he doesn't want those guys to be in that aura, but he can't move back a step either because he's in, the gate's in the way. And, maybe Valeria can do something cute to get the Peace Arbiter over to, to F4. That's not even the move I would choose. But there's options. There's movement options to try and maximize the auras. Okay, now we're seeing the heavy hitter come up. And yep, and see what Valeria's doing is she's moving the knight far enough back that Sulinder's not going to get a boost from, or now the knight is far enough out of range that damage. First of all, I think he just wants to 1 turn kill the knight. But even if the knight doesn't get 1 turn killed, um, he's too far out for all these bounce games. He's too far out to bounce. He's too far out for, any kind of damage when if the knight attacks and the atonement hits. So
Yeah.
this is the High Elves game.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see if Valeria just needs. Okay, so Knight is dead.
That'll take it down for sure.
Yep. And now, so again, now, and it's gonna go like this, advantage attacker, advantage attacker. But because now Cylinder's mage is exposed. Cylinder, High Elves doesn't really want that mage hanging out that far out, but maybe it's okay because that peace aura gives the mage a little bit more longevity. So it's going to be interesting. I'm not going to even try to predict what these guys are going to do next, but nor in a normal Shadow Elves game, you're trying to get that mage to do damage on your 10 life gate. You're trying to give Cylinder boosts. Maybe this game, Vexer's thinking, I'm going to get enough boosts for Montone. Or maybe he's sweating and being like, I don't have that mage where I want him. I'm not even going to speculate. But these are just some of the, or rather, I'm not going to commit to an answer. I'm not going to commit to a prediction.
Yeah.
But these are some of the things going through the Shadow Elf player's mind is a lot of calculations. How can I get boosts? Okay, well, there's one way to get boosts.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's interesting, like how on that very first turn, like sometimes we'd be used to just like, oh, I'm just gonna do some damage to my own gate and like stay far back. We saw that very first turn, the units were very aggressive, occupying the midfield, and so it seems like you're right in reading the matchup this way that the Shadow Elves can't really play as passive as that maybe they want in some other matchups. That if they let Valeria occupy the mid game and just do exactly what she wants, it's going to be impossible for them. Every single unit they shoot against is going to have the Arbiter of Peace protecting it, and so yeah, it makes sense here that we're seeing these units move up and try to just stop Valeria from occupying the midfield, and we're also seeing somewhat of a priority on attacking Valeria, because the Shadow Wolves have a lot of tricks to finish off assassinations, and the more damage Valeria's taken, the less she's going to be able to assist in developing that mid game.
I could not agree more. And I think this speaks to game design too. Like we all just want to see aggression. Like like even you and I that are kind of
Yeah.
econ players, you and I both like playing to the end game, the end of the decks, but that's not the same thing at all as just turtling up defensively somewhere. Like
Ooh,
I don't
look at that
I
roll. Yeah.
ugh,
Sorry, I was just looking at that. That was a 3 attack, 3 melee that didn't do anything.
ugh.
It was on an arbiter
You know,
piece, but yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean both these players are too good to get tilted by one roll like that.
for sure, for sure.
But it's painful, and I think people underestimate how painful a bad early roll is. We all remember like, that I went 3 bows on the enemy summoner, needed 2 for the kill, got 1, and now I'm dead. But, some of these early rolls can be worse. But looks like Vexer was prepared, has that game in hand. And
Ye-
yeah, we're definitely seeing Vexer protecting his front gate spot. Like he does not want um high elves parked there chewing at that 8 hit point gate.
Yeah, yeah, and you're also seeing something here that is is a strategy I've only recently heard like people start talking about in the Discord, but of focus firing targets against Valeria. Like Vexer was sure to have 3 attacks on that Arbiter of Peace if he needed it. Now that knight also could have attacked the Justice if the mage and the Seeker had finished off the Arbiter of Peace, but they didn't, and so he was ready to just completely pour all of his dice into killing this one unit, because if it fails, it can back off, it can be healed by Cassia. You don't really want to be splitting your damage when everything has this aura that makes it so that the first time it's attacked, it does 1 less damage. You really want to focus as much as you can, and it seems like Vexer is applying that here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, High Elves is confusing enough that I think we all, when we first started playing this faction, like, it's just a puddle of auras. But
Yes.
I think, like, as I've played and seen more High Elves games, there's definitely a clock to it. It definitely takes some time to draw Cassia and draw your first War Arbiter. And until that happens, Valeria is pretty necessary. You're hoping to, you're using her ability to try and pick off these early commons that the opponent can summon. And you're also really kind of buying time a little bit. You're buying time and field position using Valeria, and kind of hoping that by the time you get some of these other pieces, Valeria's not too dinged up, but she
Yeah.
might be. She might have done her job early, and now you have to play this aura game with the commons, with Cassia healing and back. Some of these events you want a big, a big law of liberty turn always feels great if you can get 5 or 6 attacks in, and Vexer knows this.
Yeah.
He does not want them to sprawl. Like, he does not want the High Elves units to kind of get into their preferred sprawl where every turn they have movement options and can manipulate the auras to their advantage. I almost sometimes see High Elves as fungal dwarves with movement. Fungal dwarves with a 1 space gap between every unit instead of being packed like sardines. Because I think
Interesting.
some of this, it's just a matter of like what pushes your buttons. Like just these formation factions. I really enjoy them, and I don't think it's that much coincidence that Prophet is definitely seen as one of the 2 top fungal dwarf players in the game, and also at the forefront of figuring out High Elves. I in some ways, I think High Elves is, I don't want to say it's what Fungal Dwarves wants to be, but it's the variation of Fungal Dwarves with movement.
Yeah.
You're thinking in some of the same ways, except you really want a much bigger battlefield to sprawl over. Um, and
Yeah.
Vexer's doing his best not to give him that. So again, and it's an interesting econ matchup too, because Vexer's gonna lose. Those knights being sent to the forefront are not coming back to be bounced.
Hmm. Hmm.
They're getting sent out to die.
And
And
oof.
oh, go on.
Yeah, no, and that seems like a deliberate decision from Vexer's part of like, I'm not gonna worry about my econ boost game as much. I'm going to be worried about stopping Valeria from just dominating the midfield. Um, and Valeria and Prophet seems to be responding to that, like just seeing that knight that started the game occupying the space where the started the turn occupying where the piece was. Prophet used Valeria's ability to steal that spot back, just inching one spot closer towards occupying this midfield,
Yep.
being his priority. Cause
Yeah, I think.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna pause talking for a minute. I wanna take a moment to breathe and really kind of take in where this game is at it right now. Um,
yeah, for sure.
yep.
It, it's
Yeah.
it's hard to think about. I feel like we're just going to be at this point just trading in the middle for a while and just see and see where that ends up. See if we get a little bit of movement here, a little bit less here, and then maybe eventually we're gonna like there'll be some big play where its Cylinder might play Glinting Speed and get 5 dice on Valeria, or Valeria might play Song of Sanctity and really just start to get in there. Like once if we see Valeria like start to be on Cylinder's side with Song of Sanctity, that's really gonna help like just take the game. But it's pretty scary to get over there. Yeah.
I think between those two factions, well, let's see what Vexer is thinking.
Yeah.
But definitely Shadow Elves is the more likely to be kind of, just kind of buying time for hand management.
Yeah.
Buying time to either unclog from events or get like, Shadow Elves does not need like a big combo, but they definitely have a lot of pieces to work with, and sometimes you're just kind of massaging that hand, waiting for them to come together. I think Valeria is for me at least, I find it much easier in terms of just you play what you've got in your hand right now. There's some
Yeah.
interesting combo, or some really synergistic thing if you're clever about it. Um, and it depends what it is. For example, like he doesn't have much of a ranged game really until either a War Arbiter or Law of Loyalty comes up. But he doesn't need it when he's drawing Justice Arbiters, but at the same time, with every Justice Arbiter, um, Cylinder's getting something without having to work at it. Without having to damage his own gates. So let's see. That was interesting that he was considering using Cylinder's attack. Um,
Yeah, for sure. It seems like those arbiters of peace are like a high priority target. I mean, and once all 5 are gone, they're gone.
yeah.
And
Well, they're deceptive. They don't look like a tanky unit. They've got that 3 life, 2 attack. Like you don't put them in the same mental bucket as those 5 life units. Um, but they're tough and they give tough to everyone. So they're not a unit you can one turn kill, and they
yeah,
make other units harder to one turn kill. So
unless
Vexer's prioritizing.
yeah,
Vexer is definitely prioritizing right now.
yeah. I mean,
Let's
it sounds like Cylinder would be maybe the only way to 1 turn kill that arbiter of peace right now. And he's a Cylinder might take a few dice in response to that.
oof. Oh, that is much further up than I normally see a
I
shadow. Oh,
know,
this is fun.
I
This is
know,
fun.
right?
I mean, this is not, and it's, again, it speaks to the quality of your opponent that you're forced to do things like this, and and the quality
Yeah.
of the Shadow Elf player that they're gonna respond.
Ooh.
Ooh.
uh,
They're gonna respect. It's this is fun. He's responding to Prophet rather than just kind of digging in and playing the game he always plays.
Yeah, like that mage over there, like I like you would never see that in a normal game. Just putting that mage so far out of reach of Cylinder, it's so
Yep.
exposed. It's a two magic
Yeah, but
four health. Yeah, but here just needing to occupy that space on the board, it
But
makes
you know
sense.
what?
Yeah,
Again, that mage is within the peace aura. It's a little bit tankier than it used to be. Now, it can still be surrounded and one turn killed, but if Prophet commits units over there, then, that shifts the game around to being around the mage.
yeah,
And that's board positioning that maybe Prophet doesn't necessarily want. And also, just to point out, we're trying to talk about these space age strats, and like the easy one is that Cylinder attacks and the Seeker faints as a blocker. Like, I don't want to overplay these exotic things when really Shadow Elves is about some of these bread and butter moves
yeah,
that you're going to see in every Shadow Elves game. I think Shadow Elves trips up new players because there's all these exotic options when really the good Shadow Elf players kind of do a lot of the same things over and over, such as use that Seeker as a blocker, use that Feint, get Cylinder's 5 attack pretty safely. All right, so we are going to see, let's see, we are seeing the battle. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah,
It
you
seems
can tell Prophet wants that mage. Oh, okay, we got a war arbiter.
it's coming down. Yeah, and
Yeah, but
like
that war that. Yep. Oh, we're gonna probably see Valeria. Let's see. Does Yep.
yeah, and Prophet seems to be punishing for you failed to kill this Arbiter of Peace. I'm gonna make you commit even more resources to it. You're gonna have to commit two
Oh,
attacks this next
oblige
turn.
comes out. All right, let's. Okay, now I have to click. Man,
Oh
there
yeah,
we go.
yep, that'll take care of it.
That's a sacrificial mage right there.
And so this is a very nice setup for Valeria. But I'd be a lot more scared if the setup was like every unit two spaces forward from where it is right now. So Valeria is sort of set up as somehow as she'd want to be at this point, but Vexer has forced her to set up on her own side of the battlefield instead of Vexer's, and that seems to be a win for the Shadow Elves.
Well, for the high elves in general, I think once you start boxing them in, their auras just get in each other's way. Sometimes Valeria wants to force but doesn't have space to force anyone to. So, I mean, that's definitely what you're gunning for against Shadow Elves. But Cylinder has, uh, you know, made, I think it's a deliberate decision. I am playing for board state rather than econ right now.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I'm kind of inching towards the board state I want, but the price has been a little bit more a little bit more inefficiency. Not quite as much magic as I want, not quite as much cycling of units, and feeding profit magic. So everything comes at a cost in this game, and there are a lot of things you have to trade off. What's my priority right now? And I am guessing it's Vexer's priority to try and get Valeria a little bit more confined.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, I don't know
Okay.
if we'll. Yep, the tome's coming down. Yeah, I don't know if we're ever gonna see Cylinder back off and how that's gonna play. Like this is just so I feel like I'm learning a lot about maybe how to play against Shadow Elves as like as what one or how to play against High Elves, I mean, as one of the principal thing. Like just seeing Vexer play in these ways that I wouldn't expect. Uh, Coming down, I guess that Seeker is going to feint to the side so the mage can shoot down. And so, yeah, so we're seeing again prioritizing single targets here. So if we take down that Arbiter of Peace with both the Seeker and the mage, Then Cylinder would be able to attack the priest, no going back. And if the Seeker goes 3 for 3 on that Arbiter of Peace, the Mage could even attack Valeria, which is great. Um,
All right, but we got the takesy backsies, so Vexer's. I liked your analysis. I think I would have gone with it. Vexer's seemingly dreaming up something better.
yeah, there's always something better, but there's only 45 minutes on the clock. And this is definitely a match that could come down to it. If you're not watching your clock, I'm sad that Joe changed it so we can't see them anymore. But how long has it been? Both players are probably like down to like 33 or so minutes on the clock. Oh, everything's coming back. And I've had some games of 45-minute clocks where I've just been like, oh, I'm fine, I'll just take some extra time here. And then come down to like it's come down to like less than a minute. I think that's happened to me twice now where I've had less than a minute in a 45-minute game for the end of it. And so it's definitely, and I like that the games just add that extra element of not only do you have to see the play, you also need to see it kind of fast if it's going to be useful. And like Shadow Elf just being trickier with what goes where is tough to play them fast unless you're very familiar with them.
You know, speaking as someone who would be terrible in a timed format, I just still really like it because I think sometimes people in the Discord get a little bit obsessed with, what's the theoretical limit of, Summoner Wars? What's the
Yeah,
theoretical limit of how good people can get? And,
yeah,
my predilection is definitely to be like, I don't care about the theoretical limit. I want to see what makes a good game. What makes a game fun to play,
yeah,
fun to watch, and absolutely thinking on your feet on a 45-minute clock, I think is just this valid dimension that maybe it means you didn't make the most optimal move, but in a competitive format, it's just kind of, like, let's just game on. I care about who won the match, not who pushed the theoretical boundaries of Summoner Wars a little bit further. And I'm definitely speaking in the first person here because
yeah,
we all find different things about the game fascinating.
yeah,
And I think despite being a chronic overthinker, I am much more in that mode of just, who won this season, who won this game, who won now. I don't necessarily need to know how could this game be most optimally played.
for sure.
But again, just this is a case where having different minds and different priorities on the Discord is absolutely just a strong benefit to the community. Okay, so he's going for
And
the
he
Seeker.
gets it. That's huge. And
All
then
right, let's
retreat
see.
back a
Okay.
step. That makes sense just to
Yep.
cover that forward gate. I mean, Valeria can move in and punch that out of the
Yep.
way.
And now oh, okay. Oh, that
Not hitting
is
it. Cylinder didn't drink his coffee or
no.
something.
Oh, well, that's that. Some of these other roles he had a backup, but this one was definitely go for the Seeker and go. Try to one turn kill that priest with Cylinder.
Yeah, it's interesting. What?
That's
Yeah,
and that's a high odds roll. 3 out of 5 bows
for
is
sure.
you know that's one of the ones where usually you say top player kind of leaves a backup plan. That was one where he went for high enough odds without a great backup
Yeah.
plan.
Well, and sometimes it's worth it just being like, if it misses, like that's fine. It's not if it's less of a priority, which maybe that piece isn't a huge priority. It's okay to not have the backup plans. I am wondering about not doing the mage play. Like it's definitely without seeing his hand and knowing everything. I don't know if I can
Ooh,
accurately figure
Valeria's
out.
gonna punish. Oof,
Okay,
oof.
yeah, me talking about how that, that wasn't a high value target. I'm not so sure about that anymore. And Prophet sees this
No, it
play
was
right
it was a
away.
high value target that he needed to take
Yeah.
down. Like he needed that 3 out of 5.
And so with Law of Liberty, you can attack in the move phase instead of attacking, and so now we're seeing each
So
of these
he's gonna
priests
have
hit for
6
6,
dice in Cylinder's face. Oof.
and
Oh,
that's rough. That's not what you want to see. So Cylinder
oh,
is down for the count. but he's not out of it. And Cylinder's definitely one of the summoners that can sort of just sit in the back and continue to be a part of the game without actually being a part of the game, if you want to. So I would not count Vexer out of this game.
Oh, I would not, but I am gonna mourn that dice roll.
For sure.
It's rough when just one single roll is that pivotal. And I think this game between two players that as evenly matched as these guys are, sometimes you have to go for that. You really can't just play your most cautious game. Sometimes,
Yeah.
for better or for worse, you have to play those dice odds.
Yeah,
And this is not a faction. By the way, I don't think there's a huge overlap. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think there's a huge overlap between people who love Shadow Elves and people who love Obsidian Dwarves. You know,
yeah.
this is not the faction for people who love big gambles.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe chat will, prove me wrong on that one. But
Yeah. It seems tough to get aggressive, but then like there's still like Talia in the deck. Like they still have some tools that like just seem to imply,
oh
hey,
my
maybe you should
goodness.
get aggressive.
The game is definitely not over, but Vexer's too good a player. I mean, he's too good a player to get tilted.
Yeah,
He's
for
too good a
sure.
player to just like forfeit.
Yeah.
But I think he also knows that he's not going to play stupid, but he can't play excessively cautiously either.
Yeah.
And this is, let's see what he's doing here.
I
But this,
think
this
I think there's
is
probably a gate coming down. Is there not a gate coming down? Oh my goodness.
Is he
Oh no,
counting on
the
that?
seeker. The
He's
seeker.
counting on this kill, and he's counting on the seeker feint.
And so that's something too. It's just like I feel like something.
Oh, now the
Oh,
game.
there's Law of Liberty, of course. So Law of
Oh my.
Liberty attacking and that's why summoning the knight there was helpful. I see.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I forget about that
Okay.
sometimes. Um,
No, no, no. Vexer outsmarted both of us in the booth.
yeah,
I was also wondering, what are you doing, buddy?
yeah. Well, sometimes I don't like until I click in the move phase, and then I see that all my units have versatile, and I'm like, oh, they do, don't they? And Vexer also, he didn't summon his knight there the first time until he clicked in the move phase. So
I mean, look how different this board looks from a few turns ago. Instead of just commons just kind of wailing on each other in the midfield,
yeah,
now we're playing chicken.
and that's what the Shadow Elves want. If the Shadow Elves can force Valeria into that, that's great for them. So the Shadow Elves like are we're down on some health, but I think this is the sort of board that the Shadow Elves would prefer to have. So there's some give and take there.
Oh, absolutely. And then that's why it's fun watching this game. That's why it's fun watching this game where there's such a huge dynamic board shift, and one big exciting dice roll. But now, Prophet has to decide, what am I going to do? I mean, he can kind of trade ranged for a little bit, but not for long. Like, he's not going to win the ranged wars for long. Now that War Arbiter's out there, he can, kind of hold his own for a little bit, but, like even if a Peace Arbiter or an Attendant Priest is shooting for 3, now okay, this is interesting. All right,
I've
2 War Arbiters. What are you up to, Prophet? What are
I've
you up to?
heard Grata saying in chat that feels like the night play can be risky with low summoner health. And yeah, it's definitely true. It's interesting. Like we see that knight like almost expose as little as possible, just to be able to bounce it. Because yeah, the last 3 health on cylinder is a resource. At this,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
And I'm going to say that's 100. Yep, yep. It's Meow or Never anticipating what I was going to say. Well, close enough. He's saying at this point, though, 3 hit point is no worse than 2 hit point, in my opinion. I would say, yeah, you sometimes go down to that last life. The difference between 3 hit point and 2, though, is really how many knights can you summon and die before Cylinder dies.
yeah,
But yeah, absolutely. Vexer is very capable of winning a game on 1 hit point cylinder. And Prophet knows this too.
yeah, yeah.
So So I mean, this is fun. This is definitely Prophet is having to think a little bit and sweat a little bit because Vexer has the board position he wants at high cost, and now Prophet has to respond to that board position and decide, you know, what do I do when I need to get units up, but now Shadow Elves is set up with really, close to their preferred gate position, and a lot of gate health. Um, I've lost track of how many mages are gone from the game already. I feel like a couple have been killed.
Something funny right now is both players are actually exactly tied with resources. In their in their the magic, cards in hand and cards in deck is totally tied right now.
That's hilarious and not the slightest bit surprising.
Yeah. I wonder if we're pushing up. I wonder if there's
Ooh.
law of sanctity coming down, because that's a pretty scary position for Valeria to be in. I'm surprised. I wonder if Prophet's looking at kind of a crappy hand right now. Because yeah, that's not the sort of play I'd be expecting, or maybe an oblige. Because you don't normally want to put your wars up in the forefront. You'd much rather use your justices for that. Ooh, Prophet
And
going down.
you can tell he's just like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this?
Yeah, yeah. I think he's
I think
making a tough decision.
I had to laugh. Like Umbral, or no, the Shrike in on Discord was like, "Well, that's an interesting design decision that you can see your opponents takesies backsies." And I'm not sure I really want to see it. I don't like having my endless overthinking shown to the opponent, but it's definitely fun for us here. Okay, Albus is at well.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it. I
All right,
can I can see
let's.
cases against it. I think it's fun. I think it's fun.
All right. Let's see what's going on. Albus is coming out, but he took a while to think about that. I think he was fiddling with the war while not wanting to reveal that he had Albus in hand until
Yeah.
he was pretty ready to commit. Ooh, I think he wants to take out that gate.
Yeah, and Meow never
Ooh.
comments. Like at the table, part of the game is seeing what your opponent is considering, and yeah, like that's like when I play real time games, they'd be like, "Oh, you mind if I take that back?"
Okay. Oh,
Wait,
Oblige
was
is coming out.
oh, I
Oblige
see,
came out.
I see.
Okay.
Oh, going for the kill!
Oh,
Oh my
going.
goodness!
Oh, how did we miss
How
that?
did? Wow, that is huge!
Whoa.
Oh my goodness. That
Oh.
and say that we say that Valeria doesn't have that many tricks
Oh.
up her sleeves.
Well,
Oh my
look.
goodness.
Cylinder is down to 1 health, and that knight is down to 1 health.
If that knight dies, it's over.
Oh.
Oh, is there any way? But Valeria doesn't have what's it called? Law of Sanctity up. Is there a kill on Valeria right now?
Oh, Onyx. All right,
Got
where
the
are you
Onyx
going with
Tome. Got
this?
the
Where
Onyx
are you
Tome. Got
going
the
with
boost.
this?
I could absolutely glinting
Oh, we
speed.
gotta go
That's
for the. Oh, does he have.
that's
Oh,
11
this
dice.
is.
That's 11 dice on a 10 health Valeria on board right now.
Oh.
All in. This
I think
game
he
just
has to go for
exploded.
it. He has to go for it.
Yeah, he can't because I mean, like
He can't not.
I mean, he could actually glinting speed in, pull the knight back, and then glinting speed out. But there's no way. Especially with that war and like your back lines. There's no way that's feasible as opposed to just go for it and hit Valeria. But maybe if you tried to kill this war with Cylinder, you glinting speeded in, you glinting speeded out to some other unit that you had behind by picking it up with Cylinder's ability, and then you also picked up this knight while you were in there. Like maybe there's a more defensive play, but I doubt we'll see it.
Yeah, I mean, we love to dream it up. I think it takes it would take some hand to actually pull that off. He does have 4 boosts. I mean, he can find some way to bounce 2 units, but man.
Oh yeah, and I was wrong. That Seeker will have the buff from the Arbiter of War as well, so that puts
Oh,
us
and
at 12
they're
dice.
both well, they both have that. Well, 7 melee, 5 ranged is probably not as bad as we think.
Yeah, I mean that on average that'll miss, but hey, that's better than
But it's
losing.
it's it's not it's not
It's not
something
nothing.
crazy. I would probably put it at like, I don't know, 25%. Like not
Yeah,
it's
around
not
there.
like it's not Hail Mary, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
It's ew.
And that's just a big part of I feel like really good play too as well. It's just like knowing when it's worth it to take risks. And we're talking about these plays earlier on that where like Vexer took a risk and it ended up he got punished for it. But just like knowing when you have to take a risk and when it's not worth it is a really tough decision sometimes.
Yeah, all right. This is the moment though. This is the moment. We're staring at an empty battlefield, and I want this shot to go off. I don't know about you, but just sitting here is like,
Yeah.
come
I
on.
mean, Vexer's sitting there with like 30 minutes on the clock, so I'm sure he's like, well, I might as well think about
We're
this.
go. Oh, okay. Oh, he can.
All right, that's
Oof.
one. We can only afford to miss one more dice out of these 9 attacks, and that's
Oh,
it.
that's all right. What's he gonna do?
Uh,
He could just attack. He
forfeit.
doesn't have to.
He's gotta. He can't
He's
let
got.
that knight
He's.
exist,
Yeah, I mean, one of these. Yeah. All right. Go out with a bang.
and he didn't summon any units behind to be able to glinting speed
Yeah,
out. So
he's gonna do it.
it's looking like an L.
He's like, I'm. Let's just do this.
Got some right melee rolling.
That's
Yeah.
like asking for Cylinder to roll 5 out of 5. Ooh.
Uh, well, it was
Well,
that was really tight. That should be it. I mean, you probably pull that knight to your hand anyway. Nope, you just concede. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way out of that. GG's. Wow, that was crazy. It just
wow.
exploded on a dime. Like it was like we were saying, like it's a very like passive game building up the midfield, but then just one thing and boom. Wow.
All right. Well, let's give those of guys a minute. Like I'm looking forward to bringing them in, but honestly, if I'm Vexer, I want a moment to breathe.
Yes, that's
Like
that's
I
that's
want
fair.
that moment of what the hell just happened? You commentators keep right on talking while I collect myself. All right,
Yeah.
we've got some GGs from both these guys in chat. I love this community. Everyone is such a good sport here. I mean, I could if I'm playing that game live, I have a strong temptation to throw the controller at the wall at that earlier cylinder 2 out of 5 roll. Um, but these guys are teammates in the Chipata Bing Chipata Boon tournament. It's all good, but let's give them a moment to breathe before bringing them in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's so many ways the matchup can go, and yeah, I feel like when Valeria first came out, I heard a lot of talk of like, oh, she doesn't have that much high of a dice output. She doesn't have like much ability to surprise, kind of like Sarah, and oh my goodness, neither of us saw that Arbiter of War coming to push for the 3-on-3 kill.
Oh my
So
good,
like,
all of us. I think I think it was Shampoo in chat was like, "What is Arbiter of War like the worst costed common in the game?" When we saw the
yeah, yeah.
cards, it's just like, "Wait, you have this 3 attack, 3 life costing 2 unit? Like, what's up with that?"
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not something you pull out if you want the econ game. Like, you don't send the Arbiter of War to the front lines if you think you're going to be trading units for a while.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the fun of this push-pull between, like, but really just so many things between econ, who's going to make it to the end of the deck, battlefield positioning, who's going to be in your face and in their preferred positioning, and just, it's just I love all these variables in this game, and the fact that you can summon an Arbiter of the War to the front lines like that and just go for the kill.
Yeah, so something I definitely want to ask about is like I wonder how both these players feel like the 45-minute clock affected them, or if at all, just as like as players that are frequently just at the top of all the leaderboards. Like, do you feel like you're able to play just as well with the 45-minute clock, or does it affect you?
Oh, it's gonna be fun. I have a lot of questions for them.
Yeah. Well, maybe, that was solid 60 seconds to breathe. Maybe let's hop into that call and see what they have to
Yeah, I think
say.
that's what we're all waiting for.
All right, I will start up that call. Rusty Discord coming through here. Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you guys. Wow, that was a crazy game. That was so explosive. How you guys feeling about that? I guess I'll just wait a second and make sure we can hear you, and also have you guys introduce yourselves. But feel free to need to grant mic access to Discord. Start without me. Oh, I see. Yes, yes, no worries. I'll see if Prophet, just go ahead and say something if you're here. And no, and we'll take a second to get it set up. Hargrod in chat saying, feels like Oblige makes Knight a little more risky at low health. Yeah, for sure. Oblige can just get so much done, especially there. Sounds like I'm gonna connect and reconnect. Just give us a second to get the call started up.
We lose? Oh,
Oh, hello.
All right.
Can you hear me this
All right,
time?
Vexer. All right, Vexer's still muted, so we're still waiting for Vexer to figure out his audio.
All right, but Prophet, you're here. How are
There
you
we go.
feeling?
yeah. You guys can hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I feel it's exhilarating. I mean, this matchup, it's a little bit of a tricky one because I think I was having the conversation. I want to say with Jessic, but or someone in the Discord, but one of the things that we talked about was how do high elves deal with shadow elves, especially when it comes to justice, right? Um, and I think that that's like kind of my biggest concern is that you can kind of just abuse or exploit justice to farm boost all day. And so I think that coming into this match, I was more focused on making sure that I could almost guarantee kills as opposed to just getting the most amount of attacks, just to kind of handicap them from really, like Shadow Elves from really pulling back all their units and all of that damage not really sticking. So it was an exciting finish. I really enjoyed how that game went. I felt like never in my wildest imagination would I have expected this game to finish 20 minutes in on each side. But I think that kind of just shows you the power of assassination on both sides. I think that both of us had a killing shot, even though we both kind of just didn't really land it the turn we intended to.
Yeah.
It just happened to be that I was able to bring it back because I was just a little bit more ahead in health. But um, yeah, exciting game. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah, that was so interesting just to see how explosive that turned out. Let's since we're still at the beginning here, I'll just have you real quick just introduce yourself just to anyone that hasn't heard your name before. Like what got you? So this is Prophet talking. What got you into Summoner Wars, and what's something that interests you about the game? What's something that you love about it?
Yeah, sure. So I picked up the game. I want to say this was probably around season 3 or 4 of the league, so not too long after its release. I actually watch Shut Up and Sit Down, which is I think they are these. I want to say they're from the UK, but
Yeah,
they're these European board game reviewers that gave just a riveting review over this game, and I enjoy the reviews a lot because I think that they are very thoughtful and critical about trying to be a little unbiased in their review. And one of the only things that they had negative to say about this game was that I think his name was Quentin. He was the reviewer for the game, and he said that ultimately the worst part of it is that it's very skill based. So the cap is so high that like you eventually either outgrow your friends or they outgrow you, and it just becomes less enjoyable as a two-player game. But at the same time, still it requires a little input outside of just playing the game that anyone can kind of just jump in and pick up. And so I have a background a little bit in card gaming. I've played it most of my life. I primarily played Yu-Gi-Oh, but I also kind of played a little bit of Magic, Hearthstone, uh, basically all the card games that are mainstream. And this one really appealed to me because I think I've always been a fan of tactic-based games, and I just love grid-based, turn-based games. And so I felt like this was the right balance from a board game and card game perspective. And I've always had an interest in your kind of push your luck elements in any game. I think Hearthstone did it pretty well, considering it was a digital not really adaptation, but a digital implementation of a card game. And so when I found this game, I was like, whoa, there is a lot of unique asymmetry that is pretty thoughtful and methodical to like how certain decks function in their mechanics versus their theme. And I really like the artwork, and so I became a huge fan of Summoner Wars ever since I started. I didn't play 1E. I know that that's a huge part of the community here is people who came from the first edition, but really glad I took the took the jump and decided to get into this game because it's probably one of my favorite top games at the moment. And I felt like this game to me, typically after a couple of years, most games would lose steam, but this one it still appeals to me for like so many different reasons. And I think one of the top of the one of the biggest ones outside of those that I mentioned is that I think it's pretty well balanced. I mean, I think there are a couple of lopsidedness in it, but I if I were to go against any random opponent and that you were to give me any random deck, I wouldn't feel like I was severely handicapped. And so uh yeah, did that answer the question? Kind of
Yeah,
went off a
thank
tangent
you.
there.
No, no, that's so interesting. I feel like you're preaching right to the choir here. Like so much of what you're saying you love about this game is like, yes, that's exactly it for me too. I want to move on real quick, but it's Meow Never has a question in the chat. What are some other top board games for you, Prophet? You have one or two in mind?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I'm a huge Gloomhaven fan.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I love it. I love Gloomhaven. I haven't tried Frosthaven yet. I'm waiting for my girlfriend to graduate optometry school. She played the first campaign with me in Gloomhaven, so it was me, her, and a good buddy of mine I've been friends with like
Yeah.
25 years. So we did a campaign, and so I'm kind of waiting for all the pieces to fall together to do the next one. But I'd say Gloomhaven is up there. Another really fun game that I think is a little bit more casual paced in Gloomhaven. I play Root. I really like Root.
Hmm.
I think the war game mechanics are really interesting in that game. Those are some of my tops. I
Yeah.
know that Linda really enjoys Agricola, more Euro style build your farm game, and I enjoy a good game like that once in a while. But I feel like killing something in a game just feels, I don't know, inherent to me. I guess I just like war games, and so I like games where you can fight one another, I guess, or something together.
Yeah.
So Gloomhaven and Root and Summoner Wars kind of creeps its way up to the top. But yeah, those are some of the
Yeah.
other games I enjoy outside of Summoner Wars.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great to hear. And let's see, Vexer, are we able to hear you? Oh, you're here.
Hey there. Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
here now.
Nice to see you. Would you want to introduce yourself too? To tell us how you got into the game and what's something that interests you about it?
Yeah, it was exactly a year ago. So I was looking for just two-player games to be able to play with my wife. I saw some reviews about this one. I checked it out, and yeah, I was surprised. It was really easy to get into, but the depth that it has is just amazing, right? With all the positional aspect to it, it really opens into like exponential complexity. You have all the resource management and all the random factor with the dice. So I really got into it when I saw there was a digital version. This is awesome, right? You can play against some of like the best players around, and it's a lot easier to just play whenever you have a few minutes left, like around a few free minutes. So yeah, that's how I got into it. I also am been playing Magic the Gathering for like over 20 years now. Playing it like heavily. At one point, I was like in the professional circuits of the Pro Tour like for 8 years. So I was really into that game. I think that's a game that is on the decline. Like Magic is running out of design space. They made some decisions more oriented toward making more money instead of making the game better.
Yeah.
And right now, I think they're running out of design space, in which now they're just rehashing like mechanics over and over again, like a rehash of the rehash. So right now, like Summoner Wars has been replacing a lot of my gaming time on Magic. I haven't really played that much. I'm just playing a lot more Summoner Wars. It's my number one game for sure. Other than that, really, I just play video games. Things like all the Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro type of games, The Witcher, all those type. Those are the main ones that I still play, and strategy games. And yeah, this game, it was interesting. At that last play, when you move the war forward, I was like, oh, here comes the second oblige.
Ben and I missed that. We were just speculating what's going on, and you knew. I think you knew before we did, definitely.
You never really sent a war like forward just like that, because it ends up being counterproductive. Like you usually want them on the back rows, right? Like the opponent is going to get more benefits out of it that you would get if you just send it as a 3/3. And this game, it's interesting because I definitely had to play it a little bit different than you would usually play. Just the fact that it was live and these are complex factions. Um, and I knew like, okay, I'm gonna have to be a little bit more aggressive than usual. That's why I even started like sending those knights forward just to start chipping into Valeria, because I felt like I was gonna have to eventually go for the assassination. Prophet, I was guessing like you were not even gonna even try to go forward with her, or if you did, you were gonna like immediately after like getting hit once or twice, just completely retreat and do the defensive formation that HE can like high elves can do really well.
Mhm.
So yeah, I knew that time was gonna be against me if things go long as this with Shadow Elves. Sometimes you can't undo, right? Like when you get past some abilities, so you have to think things a little bit more. So I try to be aggressive. I took some risks, like when I needed like 3 out of 5 on that priest, and even like that, like if I took him out, I knew that I was exposing myself to like a 3 range. It ended up being 6 range, so it was a lot more with liberty. But yeah, I definitely took some risk. I was surprised at the end. Like I even got that killing shot. That's the risk of the war, right? Like when it's in the forward position, like it gave me seven melee there.
Mhm.
But yeah, like they just didn't get it. At the end, I had like 40 something percent. It's not like it was in my favor for sure, but I got a killing shot at that point, which was as good as I could hope in that board.
Yeah, that was like my greatest fear here. I knew I had the killing shot, right? I saw you had pulled back your knight, and I said, okay, well, I can get war there after an attack using oblige to remove that knight. But if I don't kill you, I then am surrounded in so many different ways. But I figured, okay, so in order for me not to kill you, right, I'd have to go 2 for 3 on your summoner, and then also 4 out of 5 on your knight. That would have been the last blow. But of course, that's exactly how that went. And so I was like, oh god. And the crazy thing is like, yeah, you're right. I War is such a difficult unit to use effectively. I think that a lot of players starting out will kind of think of this unit as more of a frontline melee unit. But the reality of it is that a lot of times it really just backfires, and so you never really want to keep war past your first 2 rows unless you have a killing shot, which is what I took here. But yeah, no, that was definitely scary because I think if this were a longer game, say like a tournament match over 3 days or something, I might have played it a little bit safer. I might have just so I was holding sanctity, and I think you mentioned something early on is like, yeah, you normally don't really want to push with Valeria until you have at least one sanctity in hand. I don't think there are many summoners out there that summoner alone can really bring as much value as Valeria brings to the table. I think she not only can completely disrupt your board, but she can set herself up in front of your gate so that if you even just walk past her, you take 2 damage. And that's not to mention all of the immediate damage you bring. So really, really good card, Sanctity. So I had that in my hand here, and I knew that I could have played it, and that probably was a slightly safer move, which was just pop Sanctity, go for a guaranteed kill on Knight, and then bring your summoner down to 1 health after doing 1 damage war. Not really sure if I could close out a game like that. There could have been you could have just turtled really hard and just played the rest of the game from the back line. But I think at least that would for sure prevent you from using any more knights. And then if I could somehow get another unit within attacking range of your summoner, being at 1 health is still pretty dangerous. But yeah, I decided to go for the kill shot, and I think I was sweating really hard when I was watching your final rolls. I was like, oh man, that could be, that's 12 dice right there. So but yeah, I probably would have gone for the same kill shot if I saw that they had whiffed on an assassination attempt. So yeah.
So Vexer, I'm curious, when did you look up those dice odds there? Because you're on air. I was trying to say 12, 7 melee, 5 ranged. It's not bad. And I pegged it at 25%, but it looks like you actually looked it up. It is 42.9% on swzone.com. I'm curious, did you do that at the end of the game or while you were sitting there thinking?
Well, I was just before doing it. I mean, I knew I didn't really had any choice. I had to go for it, right? Because the knight was there, like it was gonna get killed. So I didn't really had a choice. But I was just curious, like, well, I mean, it's 7 melee. If those hit, like it's not hard. I just wanted to check how likely it was to see if it was like close to a coin toss. Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty close, and I think we sometimes underestimate because we've all had melee dice fail on us before, but, those were pretty good odds for a 10 out of 12 for that kind of Hail Mary play. And like I said, I actually guessed wrong on that one. That's why I love that Summoners Wars, swzone.com, the dice odds simulator. For anyone who's new here and just joining in, fantastic resource. But I'll let you guys get back to analyzing that kill shot. I was just very curious whether you actually looked it up in the moment.
Yeah. It's I always have it like next to the tab of Summoner Wars, just to make sure. And like this is I think in general this is a tough match for Shadow Elves if High Elves play it correctly, right? Like because Shadow Elves wants the other factions to try to come at them. Like that's exactly where they want to be. All the action happening around like the 3 range of Selendar, and then be able to easily then retreat that way. But they have issues when you are the one that has to go out, right? When you have to go there, because then you're out of the range, you're not able to bounce, you're not able to get the counters. And High Elves are really good at that. Like they have 2 modes. Like one of them is the full defensive mode in which the war is all the way back, and then you have your peace and the priest just shooting everything just on the back lines, and the occasional justice just going out to the other side to hit. And Shadow Elves has a really hard time against that because its ranged game is worse than what High Elves can put out, because High Elves are going to have the shield at that point, and with Shadow Elves it's harder to get it. You will have to get into the range of the shield, and then once you do that, Valeria can just completely blast your 2 magic units, right? Like the mages. So it's hard to sustain that battle at the end. Like you're always going to be losing it as they'll have the shield and the priest to heal the occasional unit. So the other situation is when HE tries to rush at you, it's easy to win that way, right? Because Valeria will eventually, even though she's going to cause some mayhem, you will eventually be able to get to her once the sanctities fizzle out or surround her, or just play your value game, getting the damages from the justices or from Valeria herself, right? Like you send the seeker, hits, goes back to damage, and then you have the 1 boost. So it's easy to just be bouncing them that way. So that's how this match usually plays up. And it's really hard to defeat HE once they just go into defensive mode, because it's really risky, like just trying to go forward with Shadow Elves that way.
Yeah, I think honestly, priest. I'm starting to find priest more and more useful. I at first when I looked at this comment, I said, okay, this is pretty average stats. I think it has a pretty cool ability, certainly better than I think temple priest in my opinion. But it really I felt like turned around the game. I want to say this is around turn 9. You had went for my priest with Salundar, and I think only managed to do 2 out of the 3 damage you needed. I couldn't summon on top of the priest, but I could summon on top of the war behind it and heal the priest, which I thought was an interesting interaction because you would think that typically the unit you're summoning on is the one you're trying to heal, but you can really extend the range of your heal by positioning your units in a way where they're almost cascaded like you would your gates to maximize summoning spots. Maximizing your pre-summoning spots also kind of increases the effectiveness of their heal. And then I think it has really good synergy with Liberty because I think one of the biggest issues with Liberty is that you're never really in a position, or your opponent really doesn't position themselves to let you get as much damage as you can. I think I got pretty lucky with the rolls there, and it ended up being very very effective. But even if it wasn't, it was still a good. I threw like using just 2 commons, 12 range dice with a war supporting them. And so, one of my favorite combos to do is to summon a priest, used Valeria to reposition that priest as she needs to be, and then just unleash with Liberty. And I think that kind of effectively helped me get a strong footing in the game where I think it was just trading back and forth in between then. So I think really an underrated common. I think priest is probably, I don't want to say they're the bread and butter of high elves. I don't really think of them like that, but they are very effective at becoming what I would consider backup pieces, because you typically want piece out there sort of just blocking rows, tanking shots. But the problem with having priest in your front line is that you end up just giving it to your opponent, and then you need to backtrack 2 spaces just to mitigate that. But you could have a priest, or you could have a couple of priests out in the front line supported with a piece somewhere in the middle or the back line, and it effectively does the same thing. You get the same amount of range dice, you get to play the same range game, but you get the added benefit of not having to readjust your formation all the time because they charge your front line. So I really think that that's probably one of the highlights of this game from my end, is that I had these priests, they were healing each other, they were doing the range game I need them to do, all without having to worry about giving the aura back to anybody. So wanted to make that comment there because I felt like that was a critical moment for me. The whiff on the priest, because that allowed me to counterpunch in a way that kind of made it difficult for shadow elves to really position Salundar to use his ability without completely risking himself. Even though you can play defensively, just high elves with so much disruption, like 2 different forces in 2 different phases, and then an oblige on top of that, it makes it really hard to kind of hide from those last couple of points.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's one of the where high elves excels, like doing those last damages, because yeah, oblige, it's just devastating, right? Like usually they're gonna block, put something in front, and you can easily remove it. Summoning, like the priest, being able to summon out of anywhere on the board from wherever you have one of this avatars, like that's one of its main uh, like its main benefits, right? That I see, like you're not limited to your side, because usually you're gonna have your gates like on the second row, maybe third. You're gonna play defensive, but then you can summon it out of that justice to deal that last damage. I've done that a few times, but yeah, as you say, it's not like it's the like the key common for the deck, but it's just a team player, right? Like it allows you to be the front line of the range game without having your piece give the benefit to the other side. I think the only element that I see on high elves that makes me doubt if they're really going to be able to compete with some of the S tier decks is when the other deck is too aggressive and it's really able to get in your face really fast. How do you handle that properly? Like if you were when something like FD, which already starts like halfway on the board, and on the first turn, if they start, they can already be in your face. It's really hard to, well, it's almost impossible to prevent them from getting those benefits and to be able to withstand that. Have you been able to have some success against factions like TO, like Tundra Orcs or Fungal Dwarves?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't. I've played a couple of Tundra Orcs matches in the tournament. I've played a couple of matches of all matchups, and I agree with you. I think if you are a player and you're going against High Elves and you feel like you just don't know what to do, just run at them. Just charge, send everything at them, and you'll find that like as you back them into a corner, into their back rows, it becomes increasingly difficult for them to freely rearrange their auras, especially if they misplace their gate or if they misplace their summoner. I think one of the hardest things for high elves to do when they're backed into the corner is use war or peace effectively, because it it is it makes high elves very efficient in trading, but the margin in which it gives itself an advantage isn't enough to offset if all of your opponents are getting that same advantage. So I've played a Fungal Dwarves game somewhere in ranked early on in the season where the player, he rushed me, got onto my side of the board, set up camp, and then just started sending carriers and beasts. And I had a war. Obviously, it wasn't killed. And so really now I was dealing with 3 damage carriers, 4 damage beast, even 5 AV blight mage. And even if I had some sort of advantage with my maneuverability, I could not keep up with the damage they were putting on. I think I managed to squeeze the win out of that game off of an assassination attempt. I think with most decks that go early aggression, they either need to have a very aggressive discard strategy or send their summoner along with the offense to really make that push meaningful. I think one of the tenets of an early aggression strategy is you draw a gate, you drop the gate in the middle of the board, or maybe even on my side. But the only way you can really do that is if you have your summoner up in the fray. And so I would say that the High Elves' response to that would be look out for opportunities, especially on whiffs, to really just punish the opposing summoner. I think that once the opposing summoner is low enough, say 6 or 7 health, and they're open or prone to some sort of versatile, oblige double attack, then their options become really limited because they not only have to spend their entire turns thinking about how exposed their summoner is going to be, but they might even need to consider retreating because they just can't cover all of the possible threat range. Um, and so it's easier said than done. Obviously, I think it is definitely one of the weaker sides of high elves. And so you'll see in a lot of my games, I usually try to take the middle of the board without exposing Valyria too much. The opening move in this game was to pull your blocking unit from the front of your gate, which I think most starting setups should have. But essentially combine Valyria's ability with my starting justice to kind of block that front of your gate and get Valyria in a position where she can take 1 or 2 hits, make something happen with her force. Even if she can't dish out the 2 damage by shoving you away, she can slowly pull your units in. So I think that was kind of, I was dancing between row 3 and 4, and then when I started taking a little bit of heat, I retreated back to row 2. I was just using her ability to keep pulling units back towards me and then shoving them into range of my other units. And so I think high elves need to kind of make a statement in the middle of the board early on, and then assess if they're going to go this full aggression strategy. If they do, if your opponent decides to go full aggro and rush high elves, I would suggest limiting the use of peace and war and going heavier into justice and priest. I think pushing into justice can kind of be devastating. And if you do have peace and you're able to get it somewhere in a back first or second row, kind of like how you would position a war, that it wouldn't hurt. I think you could keep your units alive for stronger. At the end of the day, offense is, I think, a much harder sell in this game for a lot of decks than defense, just because you need more movement, you need to have the right, cards, you need to have a gate. So you need to be well prepared to push. And so I think while it's tough, it's not impossible. And I would say that those are probably some of the things I would think about when I'm getting pressured into my side of the board.
Yeah, that's great advice to deal with those situations.
Yes.
All right, was
That's a timer, but we got a few more minutes. Didn't mean for that to sound out. Did you have a question?
Oh no, I was asking about the timer, but I mean, this is, Ben, thanks again for bringing this together. Like this strategy that you're hearing from these guys is worth its weight in gold.
I know, right? I'm just
And
sitting here, just taking notes, like, oh, the high elves do this and that.
I know, I'm like, I don't care about the stream, just like, it's like this could be a private conversation, and it's like, man, I'm already learning so much about the game that I just commentated, by the way. But but again, this is, hats off to you, Ben, for bringing this together.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy to have you guys on and just be chatting about it and yeah, putting voices to what we're always talking about in the Discord so much. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, happy to be on here. Really glad you're doing this. I'm a huge fan of any Summoner Wars content. I used to watch Colby stream, every chance I get. It's sad he stopped that, but I really do think there's a good space for Summoner Wars kind of live content, kind of like this. I do enjoy kind of the live format just because it's quicker paced and especially when people are taking a couple of minutes to think out their turn. There's a lot of discussion to be had just in positioning, card draw, more so than I think your typical card game. So I definitely think there's a great space, and I hope you guys keep doing this because I think a lot of players out there are very interested in the game and they're still trying to find content. I remember I was, and it's just not, there's not a lot out there. And so, really, really happy with what you guys are doing, and I hope this continues for the foreseeable future.
Oh, I absolutely remember what it was like to be new at this game and seeking out content. Like this is pretty much exactly why I'm doing it now. It's kind of come full circle. So, you know, if it's funny, it's like if I can't find it, I will create it. I am stubborn that way.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe let's end it off this way. I've one more question, maybe to ask both of you, and then we can call it. I'm curious. So both of you, and I don't mean to type you as players, but I tend to see both of you on like the cutting edge of the new decks when they're coming out. That you both seem to be putting hours with them, developing strategies like right when they've come out. I'm wondering what sort of advice, and you're welcome to disagree with that typing. But I wonder what sort of advice you would have to newer players or just to anybody who picking up a deck you've never played before or that's new that like people haven't really developed strategies for, like how to go about learning and developing your own strategies for decks and just figuring out something just totally blind. How do you guys go about it? What sort of advice would you have for other people?
Well, I would say in there really is just a matter of just repetition, right? Just practicing the deck, learning the mechanics, learning the interactions, learning when to be aggressive, when to be defensive, right? Because this is what is so great about this game. Like, although the question to most of the like the answer to most of those things really varies on each matchup, right? Like sometimes you have to be all the way to the back defense, sometimes you just want to go all the way like crazy forward because you know that's your only shot against that matchup. So and once you know like what are the strengths and weaknesses of each faction, like it doesn't matter if you never really play that matchup. Like many times you already have an idea. Okay, so I know both decks. I know what are their strengths and weaknesses. So I know I need to approach this matchup in this way or another. Or you know like which champs you just automatically discard, which champs are really useful on that one, right? Like those type of things. It's really just a matter of getting to know all the cards, like playing the deck a lot until you really understand how to maximize all those interactions. And yeah, and that's pretty much, I would say, it. What do you think, Prophet? Anything you could add there?
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think repetition is key. I remember when High Elves came out, I play tested them for a little bit. I think I forgot what iterations they were on, but I remember really liking the deck, but it also just being an absolute mind bender of a puzzle. And when it first came out, I was like, man, I really like Valeria as a summoner. I think she's just super cool, super active. She's very unique, and I really enjoy the whole artwork and theme of this deck. So really, I just put my nose to the grindstone here and just started grinding out games. I queued up, I don't know, 50 or so games in rank just to practice them. And I think I tried Swamp Orcs for a couple of games and they were cool. But I think really I just wanted to maximize my time in ranked with High Elves. Because I had decided I was going to bring them into the release tournament. Um, I think as far as evaluating the newer decks and some advice, one of the first things I consider is okay, each summoner is a unique blend of two faction symbols. So I always take a look at that and try to think, okay, well, what do these faction symbols typically try to do mechanically? And what kind of synergies do they bring together? So I think in this instance, Valeria is the shield and the resolved, and so that's kind of like Breakers and Vanguards kind of had a love child. And so I was thinking, okay, they want to preserve their units, they want to kind of control the field, a little bit of both. And so that gives me a little bit of an agenda when I'm going into my matches, thinking, okay, the way I can win games and the way I see games win end usually are typically economy or assassination. And so, do I have the tools necessary to do both? And if so, kind of what are the right combination of cards to make that happen? Um, and so that's kind of my thought process of evaluating. Okay, here's a deck. Here are some of the mechanics it's bringing. If I'm curious as to how these decks should play, maybe I should take a look at some other decks that share those symbols, right? So breakers, they're heavy range. They like to manipulate the battlefield and positioning using force to get multiple attacks down the same row. So if you played Valeria like you played breakers, you would have a very defensive game with priest and war, shooting down the field with a lot of back row gates. On the flip side, if you wanted to play a longer preservation game, kind of like Vanguards, you would use more peace. You would try your best to get out Cassia. You would combine, Cassia and Albus to kind of generate just this immovable wall of units that becomes incredibly frustrating to deal with. Um, and whether or not you go one or the other really depends on your matchup. And so, kind of like what Vexer was saying, is like, yeah, you need to consider who you're going against. For example, I played High Elves in the most recent tournament against Polar Dwarves, and my knowledge of Polar Dwarves informed me that these guys don't really have any sort of unpredictable burst damage. I think they have Bear Cavalry and Ice Smiths, but you can usually see that a turn or so coming away. And even then, there's no real way for them to get to you outside of their typical 2 movement range. So the damage you can kind of predict for the next turn is pretty predictable. And outside of an Ice Ram combo, it's pretty manageable. So you can kind of expect what kind of damage you'll be receiving. So in those kind of games, I might lean towards more of a preservation value economic focus, where I'm just keeping units alive. I know that if they whiff or if I have peace on the board, it'll be very tough for them to remove units in one turn. So that just makes Cassia even more valuable. Whereas when you're playing, let's just say, High Elves versus Breakers or High Elves versus Phoenix Elves, where they are more apt to play a range game, then you can say, okay, maybe I play this a little bit more like Breakers here, where I'm focusing more on my ranged game. I'm keeping War in the back. I'm not really overexposing Valeria. So I guess start to bottom, that's kind of my thought process. And all of that is just reiterated time and time after just multiple and multiple games in a competitive format, but even just practice games. I think you'll start to understand a deck when you kind of format it that way and say, okay, what are the tools I have at my disposal, and how can I leverage that based on the specific matchup I'm playing?
That's that. Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, that's amazing. I've got nothing to add other than that. Just, admiration for just the ability of both of you to really just dive into these decks that are, kind of a mystery to all of us at first. We're just reading the cards and trying to figure it out. And then we have both of you guys, really on the cutting edge. And I think it speaks to your flexibility as players as well that and I mean, I'm more familiar with Vexer's game, I guess, but just really, whatever is coming out isn't like, Vexer, it's the deck. It's just really being able to adapt to the deck rather than picking the handful that suits your play style. I think both of you are pretty amazing at just having a play style for every deck and being willing to, adopt this format of having the Discord decide what factions you're going to play. Both of you were just kind of like, bring it, like whatever they choose, I'm going to do it. And it just speaks to your skill as a player, both of you, that you can do that. Just play the deck, not have not have, and cede enough control as a player to just adapt. I mean, that's why both of these players are really at the top of the, just some of the best players in the game, in the universe right now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
no, thank you.
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, I definitely enjoy just really playing all decks, right? Because you have to kind of like ask yourself, like, okay, what is this deck trying to do, as Prophet was saying, and develop a completely new strategy for each of them. So yeah, I really never just focus on trying to master a single deck and just play that nonstop, unless they are new, right? Until I become good with it. But I try to just cycle through all decks, and when a new deck comes out, I really also try to master it and then just let it go and keep playing the other ones, just to keep things feeling like fresh and new and entertaining. So yeah, it's I think one of the coolest things about Summoner Wars. Like as long as they keep releasing new factions, it's never really gonna feel like the same thing you played over and over because it just opens up like all these new matchups that you never played before that require a new way of thinking and a new strategy to be developed for them.
Yeah, I really just love what they did with High Elves. We've talked a little bit, some of the guys on the playtesting channel and people who like to speculate about design, like, hey, the masses love it when the summoner is involved. Let's get some summoner heavy decks. And for a while, we had the decks come out of like, wow, Eternal Council, Eddie is going to chuck 8 ranged dice, and Celeste's going to throw 6 dice, and, Muglug is going to be able to throw melee dice at range. And it just kind of felt a little bit like a summoner's arms race, and Balzar, of course. I forgot Balzar, with his walking Vegas casino. But for a while, it felt a little bit like, just the summoner arms race. How many dice can the summoner throw? And then you get Valeria, who is so pivotal to the deck, yet has such a different mechanic. And, again, this is just me throwing design accolades at, Colby and Plaid Hat Games and everyone who really, is focused on keeping these decks fresh. Is Valeria has only these 2 melee dice, but just her ability to force units and potentially give high elves 5 moves per turn, it's just a great design space. I when I first read the card list, I was like, all right, are you guys being esoteric for the sake of being esoteric? Have we reached that part of the design space where, it's complexity for the sake of complexity? But I think the more I deep dive into high elves, the more I'm like, no, man, it's a fresh twist on an old, on the basic Summoner Wars bread and butter mechanic. Um, that just adds a really interesting layer without trying to turn it into a new game or, without trying too hard. So I'm excited about future deck designs. I was one of the biggest skeptics of 66 decks, and maybe I still am, but the ones that have come out recently have just been really pushing new aspects of the design space in really interesting directions, in my humble opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. I was just say I completely agree with that. I find it remarkable how original all the new factions feel. Like they completely feel like they're doing their own thing, not a repetition of the other ones, or not just like too close to what the other ones do. And I also wonder like how are they going to do? Like, is there enough design space to do 66 factions? But so far, I mean, they just keep nailing it over and over again with each new pair. I think I haven't really been disappointed with any of them that don't feel like their own thing, their own concept. So yeah.
Yeah, I commenting on the High Elves design. When I first saw the deck, I was like, "Whoa!" It's extremely complex, and I wasn't sure if that was really adding to the theme. But the more I thought about Valyria, how she is just this royal figure, and her ability dictate being just sort of a very authoritarian kind of I'm the queen and you need to know it. It just felt so thematically right, especially when you have an event called Oblige, and it's just this very common focused deck. And I think I was talking on the Discord with someone how there is just this kind of dual meaning behind how her units have these very powerful, and even her events have these very powerful auras and abilities. But to justify it, we say, well, this applies to everyone, but the reality of it is that it applies to everyone as I please because I decide how where my units end up. And so I've always felt like there was maybe this political message that it's kind of just hidden in this agenda here, but it felt really thematic to me. And honestly, all the decks out there, they Wayfarers, Shadow Elves, they all felt really great thematically. And so that's sort of why I think this game just still feels fresh to me after a couple of years. I know some players might feel that there's too many releases, but I personally love it. I think that every deck they've brought out is a combination of both something familiar and something new and interesting. And to your point, yeah, I think we were seeing so many iterations of decks that are summoner focused, but the way they do that is just, putting numbers on a card. They're, you throw 6 dice, 8 dice, 100 dice. It's fun, but like, I was thinking, how can you get your summoner more involved? And then Valeria comes in with so many different applications, and I'm like, wow, you guys did it again. So yeah, really excited. I think there are a couple of decks that are in process of being released right now, and I'm also very excited for those too. So I was talking to, I think, Aaron VW8, and I told him that one of my goals in every tournament is to try to enter with deck that tournament is releasing for. So I think High Elves this one, and I think Mountain Vargath for the next one, right? So I think that kind of is a good testament to how interesting and competitive these decks are feeling, and how I think even to this match here, where we could just survey the Discord, say, hey, give us any faction, we'll play it. It's a pretty well balanced game, especially at even high competitive levels, which is just absolutely remarkable to me. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great note for us to leave this off on. This was a ton of fun. I was so happy to get both of you on. Does anyone have any last thing just that they want to say?
Thank you very much, guys, for putting this together. Yeah, this was fun.
yeah, thanks guys, thanks for having us.
Yeah, okay, awesome. Well, we'll be hoping to keep doing more of these. We'll either have another one next week or the week after. Just stay tuned in Discord, and let us know if you'd like to come on as a contestant. Yeah. So
Yep, absolutely. I think I just want to add, even though we're opening big with some of the big names, we're really looking to spotlight, some of the really good, some of the really good, some of the really new players that people don't know as well, that might not be as active on the Discord or might be just too new for, to be familiar faces. So just anyone here who wants to be on stream and be a competitor, don't think you have to be a big name. Don't think you have to be the best of the best. Like Ben and I were joking back channel about, just waiting for the opportunity to be watching this Prophet and Vexer game and being like, yep, you know what? That's a common rookie mistake they just made there, We were just sitting there like hoping for that, and it's not happening. But we're not gonna roast anyone who makes rookie mistakes. This is a time pressure format that I personally know I would be terrible at. So I'm just don't be afraid to come on. You know, if this sounds like fun to you and it sounds like fun to just get a chance to chat with some of the regulars in the community, like, you know, just message either of us on the Discord.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the more we play, especially with these newer matchups, like I feel like as commentators, we're learning as we go, and we love to be learning with you. Love to have people in chat coming out and be like, no, you're wrong about that. I think this. So yeah, we're just hoping to do more and just get more people chatting about this great game. Yeah, and with that, I'm gonna call the stream. Thanks again to Fuzzy-marmot, Vexer, and Prophet for coming on. And I hope to see people around. All right, bye bye.